In other news, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has arrived in China. His one-day visit will make him the first G7 leader to visit China since the beginning of the COVID pandemic. The high-stakes visit is being closely watched because people want to know how serious Germany really is about reducing its economic reliance on Asia's rising superpower and confronting its communist leadership. The trip comes amidst rising voices within Scholz's ruling coalition who have been calling for a rethink of Germany's China policy. Beijing has been Berlin's biggest trading partner for the last 6 years. But in a bid to address the rising geopolitical tensions, the current three-party coalition government has announced its intention to reduce its economic dependence and strengthen relations with democratic states in Asia. According to a recent survey, 1 in 2 Germans wish that Germany's economy could be more independent from China. The West is also cautiously watching Scholz's one-day visit to China, especially after one of Europe's largest ports, the Hamburg port, joined forces with a Chinese shipping giant. The West is also concerned about China's human rights record and trade practices. Olaf Scholz, who will be meeting both the Chinese premier and the president, is expected to raise human rights concerns and discuss the autocratic tendencies of the Chinese government. According to a German official, Scholz also hopes that China could help persuade Russia to end the war in Ukraine. For more on this story, we're now joined by Einar Tangen, a political and economic commentator. He joins us from Beijing. Mr. Tangen, thanks very much for joining WION. Now, this visit is being watched very closely by Europe. How exactly does Beijing view this visit, considering that there is a lot of pressure on Olaf Scholz really to, as we've been saying, reduce Germany's dependence on China?
Well, Beijing is looking not only at Olaf Scholz, but also the people who are coming with him, who are basically the heads of the major German industries, whether it's car, BioNTech, Siemens, the very large chemical maker, BASF. And they understand that right now, given Europe's difficulties with energy and food, that it's almost impossible to produce there competitively for the markets. I mean, it's not even a question of how much you pay. In some cases, they may not have access to the kind of energy they need to run their factories, or in the case of BASF, the feedstocks that they need in order to produce their chemicals. So they're in a very tough bind until some sort of equilibrium comes about. China is not trying to press them on this. They simply want to know exactly what Olaf Scholz wants to bring. Remember, Macron approached Scholz and said, let's have a joint visit to China. A little odd, given that the invitation has to come from China itself. But anyway, it was a proposal that was not accepted by Scholz. He's basically going here alone. A lot of the things that he has done has been kind of contrary to a lot of the, let us say, more conservative elements within his party and within Germany. You gave the statistics about how Germans feel. A lot of this is press hype that's being pushed internationally, as evidenced by your lead-in. There's a very, very strong bias against China. China scratches its head. They don't see why. They believe that the Xinjiang issues in Hong Kong have been trumped up and that they have, in fact, been delivering for the people as opposed to the governments that criticize them.
All right. Now, there is no doubt, Mr. Tangen, that this visit comes at a time when there's growing friction between China and the Western powers on multiple fronts, whether it is the Russia-Ukraine war, what's happening in Taiwan, or what is seen as China's growing aggression and even expansionism. Do you believe that it's going to be a tough tightrope walk for Olaf Scholz as he tries to balance Germany's interests, which do seem to depend on Beijing to a large extent, as you pointed out, even as he tries to appease his Western allies? Also, reports suggest he's likely to bring up China's human rights records. Is that something that's likely to offend the Chinese?
No, I don't think as long as he's not trying to do it in open public and make a spectacle of it, or create some sort of media things. If he wants, he is free to raise whatever issues he thinks are relevant behind closed doors, where no government likes to be told, and including India. India bristles at the idea of people interfering in areas about Kashmir and other internal policies. So yes, he's free to do that. In terms of Russia, remember China's position on this is no different from Brazil's, from India's, from basically the global South. They are not sending bombs or anything like that to Russia. They were equally upset about the situation because it was, Ukraine was a large trading partner. It was essential in their expansion of the Belt and Road Initiative. And basically, this has cut them off and wasted a lot of energy and time and money for China. And China has been very clear. There have been a number of articles that they will not side with Russia if nuclear weapons are used. So this myth that somehow China has sided with Russia is nonsense. If you look at trade volumes, there are many countries who are far exceed China in terms of the percentage of increase, including European ones, who have increased their trade with Russia. So this idea that somehow China is the only one who's supporting Russia through this time is nonsense. It is simply trade, and other countries are hypocritically claiming that somehow China is the only one, when in fact they have increased their trade by many times what China says.
All right, interesting. You're saying this perception is all nonsense, but yes, this is clearly the perception globally today that China is a country that seems to have sided with Russia in this ongoing war. But as we said, this is an important visit, one which will be viewed very closely by Western capitals. Thanks very much, Einar Tangen, for speaking to WION.